At Briarwood, she was a shadow, quiet, overlooked by the wealthy elite. But after the humiliation went too far, she didn't cry, didn't fight back. She just smiled. Because a wolf doesn't snarl, it waits. At Briarwood Academy, where marble hallways reflected golden lamplight like candle flames and the lockers gleamed each morning as if freshly waxed, Ellie Dawson did not exist as an individual. She was a shadow, slipping quietly through the corridors like a breeze no one bothered to notice. Ellie, 16, a junior transfer from Chicago, had earned a full scholarship thanks to her exceptional academic record. But at Briarwood Academy, achievement wasn't enough to earn recognition. Reputation here was built on family legacies, the Range Rovers parked out front, and weekend parties at lakeside estates. Victoria Sterling, the daughter of a high-profile tech investor and the undisputed queen of Briarwood's social ecosystem, had always singled Ellie out as a favorite target. The scholarship girl with the outdated jacket, worn-out sneakers, and untamed curls was everything Victoria deemed beneath her. What Victoria didn't know, however, was that behind Ellie's thick glasses and downward gaze lay a deadly calm, a quiet forged in thousands of hours of training in her grandfather's basement back in Chicago. Raymond Dawson, a former national medalist in martial arts, didn't train Ellie to win trophies. He taught her how to breathe when backed against the wall, how to read a move in someone's eyes, and most of all, how to endure. When the wolf shows its teeth, he once told her, the flock never looks at the same again. That day in American history class, Ellie was paired with Victoria for a group presentation. As Ellie softly explained the Cold War, Victoria scoffed and turned to class, saying she must have learned whispering from her scholarship donor. The room erupted in laughter. Ellie stood still, her fingers tightening around her notebook, though her expression didn't change. Once again, she let it pass, just like her grandfather taught her, because it wasn't time yet. But behind those thick glasses, something shifted. Something no one else in that classroom saw. Ellie Dawson had started counting down the moment when the flock would learn exactly what a wolf looked like. That afternoon, at the small house on Portland's west side, Ellie carefully folded her ink-stained uniform and placed it in the laundry basket. Without asking, Raymond knew what had happened. He only had to glance at the look in his granddaughter's eyes. Saying nothing, he simply pushed a mug of hot cocoa across the kitchen table, then returned to his worn armchair, where the Art of War lay open to a familiar page. "Another quiet day?" he asked, eyes still on the book. "Yes," Ellie replied, voice soft but steady. "I don't think it's going to stay quiet much longer." Raymond finally looked up, his seasoned eyes carrying the weight of someone who had lived long enough to know silence wasn't always weakness. "You know my rule," he said. "Don't strike before the time is right. But when it is, you don't back down." Ellie glanced at her hands. Every knuckle held muscle memory from countless punches, kicks, and counters drilled over and over again on the padded floor of the basement. But the hardest part hadn't been learning to fight. It was learning to hold back. "I know," she said softly, "but sometimes it feels like I'm being swallowed whole." Raymond stood up, walked over to the cabinet, and pulled out a small, weathered wooden box. He set it gently on the table, opened the lid, and revealed a pair of warm but sturdy leather training gloves. "These belong to your mother. She wore them when she competed in the Western Regionals in 1996. Now they're yours." Ellie lifted the gloves with both hands, as if she were holding a legacy rather than just training gear. "I still remember how she stood," she said, back straight, hands steady, like nothing in the world could knock her off balance. Raymond nodded, because she believed in her strength, and she never struck in anger. That evening, beneath the dim yellow light of the basement, Ellie stepped into her fighting stance, her curls tied high. The first punches echoed like war drums. With every hit against a heavy bag, she shattered a piece of the insults, the contemptuous glances, the laughter behind her back. She wasn't training to retaliate. She was preparing for the day Briarwood would see the real Ellie Dawson. And this time, no one would be able to look away. Victoria Sterling's birthday was the biggest event of the year at Briarwood Academy, where status was measured by brand names on clothes and follower counts on social media. The party was hosted at the Sterling estate, a 3-acre mansion with a saltwater pool, private tennis courts, and a French-trained pastry chef. Ellie hadn't planned on going. She knew them. Victoria, Madison, Chloe never invited her anywhere out of sincerity. There was always an angle. Still, a small part of her, the part that remembered simple birthday parties with her mother, wanted to believe maybe this time would be different. That maybe, just maybe, she could belong somewhere. A simple navy dress, ankle boots, natural curls let down. No glasses, no oversized jacket to hide her frame. When Ellie walked into the mansion, heads turned, not in mockery, but in confusion. Something was different. Victoria, draped in a red dress with sharp-cut lines and smile like a razor, greeted Ellie with a bright pink mocktail. "You made it after all," she said sweetly, voice dripping with poison. "We were worried you wouldn't be brave enough." Ellie said nothing. She quietly accepted the drink, her lips pressed together. The party swirled around them in pounding music and glittering lights. Ellie sat alone near the rose trellis, her gaze cautious. Then the speakers cracked to life. Victoria stepped up to a small platform, raising her drink. "Before we blow out the candles," she said with a sugary smile, "I want to take a moment to celebrate someone very special." The spotlight hit Ellie. She stood slowly, each step forward feeling like she was walking into a trap. And then, from the second floor, a bucket of bright pink paint came crashing down. Ice cold heavy. It drenched her completely, coating her in a thick, viscous layer like watered-down blood. Laughter exploded. Phones flew into the air. Cameras flashed. Ellie stood still. She didn't wipe it off. She didn't react. She simply lifted her head and looked directly at Victoria with eyes so calm, so dark. They chilled the room. Not anger, not fear, just a deadly silence, as if something had awakened after years of sleeping. She walked through the crowd of laughter and phone cameras with steady, deliberate steps, cutting straight across the party. She didn't look back. That night, she didn't cry. She went down to the basement, laced up her gloves. And for the first time, when Ellie Dawson struck the heavy bag, she was no longer a shadow. She was a storm. By Monday morning, Briarwood Academy buzzed like a beehive rattled from the inside. The video titled Paint Girl had spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, it was everywhere. Snickers, whispers, judgmental stares followed Ellie into every classroom, down every hallway, around every corner. But the thing that confused them the most was that Ellie didn't waver. She didn't bow her head, didn't avoid their eyes. Gone was the slouched, forgettable silhouette that once served as her camouflage. Now, as she walked with her shoulders squared, her steps sharp, her dark skin gleaming under the academy's pristine white lights, there was something in her gaze that made even the most seasoned bullies hesitate. In math class, Madison, Victoria's ever-loyal lieutenant, watched Ellie from the back row. When Ellie walked past her desk, Madison subtly stuck out her foot, the same old trick that had sent Ellie sprawling more than once in the past. But this time, no one fell. Ellie sidestepped the trap, so fluidly it looked like choreography. She kept walking without so much as a flinch. Madison blinked, confused, and for perhaps the first time in her life, she felt a chill creep up her spine. At the end of the day, 3 football players, Jackson, Jalen, and Rourke, lured Ellie into the old equipment room behind the gym. Victoria was waiting, eyes blazing. "You think a new walk is all it takes to scare us?" she spat. "Who's small now, huh?" Ellie glanced around. 4 of them, 1 exit. No weapons. 2 breaths was all it took to calculate everything. Jackson stepped forward, reaching for her arm. The moment his hand brushed her jacket, Ellie turned. A clean, precise move sent him stumbling backward into ball rack. Jalen lunged next, only to meet a sharp low kick that buckled his knee with a choked groan. Rourke was left standing, frozen. Ellie didn't need to hit him. One look, cold, razor-sharp, was enough to make him retreat. She walked out of the room without a scratch, leaving 3 fallen bullies behind. Victoria stood motionless, eyes locked on Ellie, seeing, for the first time, not a target but a hunter. 3 days after the equipment room incident, no one looked at Ellie the same way. The stares were still there, but the laughter had vanished. Now, the whispers were laced with caution and curiosity. The same kids who used to shove and smirk suddenly found reasons to be unusually polite when passing her in the halls. Ellie didn't have to do anything more. Not a single punch. Not a single threat. She simply showed up, quiet, watchful, and when someone tested the boundary, she responded just enough, like the time she caught a falling biology lab ball between two fingers without blinking. Principal Simmons began to take notice. A PE teacher quietly suggested Ellie join the martial arts club, but she declined politely. She hadn't come to school to show off her skill. Ellie's goal had never been to win with fists. She wanted change by becoming impossible to ignore. In English class, she started raising her hand, something she had never done since transferring to Briarwood. And when she spoke, the class listened. Not because she was loud, but because every word felt sharpened like a blade honed in silence. After one discussion, Ms. Marsh blurted out, "Ellie, you should consider writing for the school paper." And so she did. Within 2 weeks, Ellie's new column, cut to the truth, sent tremors through the halls. Short, precise pieces calling out subtle injustices on campus. No names, but everyone knew who she meant. Somehow, Ellie had figured out how to hit without ever laying a finger. At the same time, Victoria's hull began to crack. Chloe, one of her 2 remaining lieutenants, suddenly changed seats in class and started studying with students she used to ignore. Madison began avoiding Victoria's eyes any time they passed in the hallway. As for Victoria, for the first time in 3 years, she was left off the planning committee for spring formal. The student council had chosen Ellie as lead coordinator, a blow to the pride of someone who used to rule unchallenged. Ellie didn't have to declare anything. She just stepped into Victoria's world and started pulling out the bricks from the throne room one by one. The student recognition ceremony was held that Friday afternoon in Briarwood's grand auditorium. Nearly 300 students and the full faculty staff were present. The lights shimmered. The rows of chairs were perfectly aligned, and the red carpet stretched toward the stage where Principal Simmons was about to present Ellie Dawson with the award for outstanding contribution to school culture. Ellie stepped onto the stage in a crisp uniform, composed and calm. No one laughed. No one whispered. Only respectful silence, and a few held breaths, waiting for something unusual. They were right to expect it. Just as she received the certificate from Principal Simmons, the back doors of the auditorium flung open. Victoria Sterling strode in, red dress, heels clicking against the tile, lips painted bold, eyes sharp as knives. She marched straight to the stage, uninvited, and snatched the microphone from Principal Simmons's hand. "I'd like to say a few words." Victoria smiled, but her eyes were ice. "I think it's fascinating that we're honoring someone so good at playing the victim. Ellie, the scholarship girl trained from childhood to pretend she's helpless." Whispers rippled through the auditorium. Ellie stood still, unblinking. "Don't fall for the angel act," Victoria continued, her tone dripping with sarcasm. She took down 3 football guys in seconds. Who knows what she's capable of next? Ellie stepped forward, not to argue. "What are you trying to prove, Victoria? That you're not who everyone thinks you are." So Victoria kicked off her heels and strode to the center of the stage. "1-on-1, right here. If you win, I'll apologize. If you don't, everyone will finally see who you really are." The room froze. Ellie nodded. And then the duel began. Victoria lunged, throwing a sloppy kick. Ellie sidestepped. A punch followed. Ellie pivoted smoothly, staying in a guarded stance. No retaliation. No anger. Just perfect defense. Like a teacher demonstrating form, not a fighter in a match. Victoria started to tire. Her breathing grew ragged. One final desperate charge, and Ellie caught her wrist, turned with a movement, and brought Victoria to the ground in a clean, painless sweep. The motion was effortless. Beautiful, even. The auditorium held its breath. Ellie leaned down and whispered, "I don't need to fight to win." Then she stood, walked off stage, leaving behind silence, then an eruption of applause. Not because she won, but because she chose restraint over revenge. Briarwood wasn't the same after the showdown. News of the confrontation between Ellie and Victoria tore through the school like wildfire, and Strangely, not a single soul laughed at Ellie anymore. Instead, their stares were filled with respect. And toward Victoria, only a hush of wary uncertainty. On Monday morning, Madison Hayes, Victoria's former closest confidant, stood quietly outside the principal's office. Next to her was Chloe Brennan, another longtime member of the inner circle. "We want to tell the truth," Madison began, her voice calm but resolute as they were invited into the office, "about Victoria Sterling and everything she's done." For the next 30 minutes, the two girls laid it all out. Every cruel prank on scholarship students, the veiled threats, and the pink paint stunt at Victoria's birthday party, meticulously planned and executed under her orders. "We used to think it was just a joke," Chloe added, her eyes misting. "But Ellie didn't deserve that. No one does." Principal Simmons sat in silence, taking in every word. The fairness in him stirred deeply. That same afternoon, he called an emergency board meeting and summoned Victoria. She arrived without remorse, that same smug half-smile still on her lips. "They're making it up to tear me down," she sneered. But her composure faltered as Principal Simmons opened a thick file on his desk. Students Madison Hayes and Chloe Brennan provided statements, along with text messages, photos, and a video recording of you confessing during a private party, he said, each word deliberate. "In addition to verbal harassment and intentional defamation, we can no longer allow you to remain at Briarwood." Victoria stood up, face pale. "You'll regret this." "No," Principal Simmons replied, eyes steady. "We're simply correcting a mistake we let continue for far too long." 2 days later, a notice appeared on the bulletin board outside the main office. Victoria Sterling, permanently expelled for violations of the school's code of conduct. The news spread like wildfire, and for the first time in years, the air at Briarwood felt lighter than ever. Since Victoria's expulsion, Briarwood Academy seemed to shift into a new chapter. The cliques that once ruled the hallways fractured and faded. The sneers once reserved for the scholarship kids quieted into a silence filled with self-reflection. The campus felt freer, easier to breathe in. But what surprised everyone most was how Ellie chose to live afterward. She didn't claim Victoria's throne. She didn't become the new queen everyone expected her to be, though she easily could have. Instead, Ellie remained herself, quiet, composed, arriving on time, completed her assignments, and eating lunch alone at the back table in the cafeteria. Only now, that silence was wrapped in something entirely new. Respect. Teachers looked at her differently now. In Ms. Bennett's literature class, when Ellie spoke, the room fell silent. No one scoffed or fake coughed when she raised her hand anymore. Her analysis of Gatsby was quoted in the following week's lecture. "That girl has depth," Ms. Bennett said in the faculty lounge. The kind of strength schools can't teach, but should protect. Madison tried several times to approach Ellie, leaving apology notes on her desk, bringing coffee before first period, offering to shelve her books in the library. Ellie would simply nod, politely, never cold, but never open. "I'm not angry anymore," Ellie said when Madison finally worked up the courage to apologize one last time. But forgiveness is a privilege, not an obligation. The quote spread through Briarwood almost as quickly as the scandal that preceded it. It wasn't arrogance. It was a boundary, one Ellie had drawn to protect herself, and no one dared cross it. One spring afternoon after gym class, a group of underclassmen jogged after Ellie. "Ellie, could you teach us how to dodge like you did at the assembly?" Ellie stopped, turned, her expression softening. "First," she said, "don't ever let anyone see you as a victim." From that day forward, every Wednesday afternoon, a quiet corner of the Briarwood athletic field became something new, a space where Ellie taught a small group of students basic self-defense, not to strike back, but to stand firm, not for revenge, but to never fall again. One Monday morning, Ellie opened her locker in Hall C and found an unfamiliar envelope tucked neatly between her math book and notebook. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and unsigned. Inside, in precise handwriting, it read, "We've been watching. It's time you knew who you really are." Enclosed was a single embossed symbol, a closed fist encircled by a ring. Beneath it, an invitation. "Meet us, Briarwood Park, at sunset, 4th bench from the lake." Ellie's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to ignore it. Survival had been hard enough without stepping into another world. But somewhere deep inside, she knew her recent actions hadn't just been resistance. They were an awakening. And people like her? They always got found. That afternoon, under the fading light slipping through the chestnut trees, Ellie sat on the old stone bench, just as the letter had said. A woman appeared, tall, lean, her silver hair catching. Hints of amber in the sunset. She didn't introduce herself. She simply placed a small wooden box on the bench beside Ellie. "You're not like the others," the woman said, her voice calm and steady. "You didn't strike when you could have. You didn't boast, even though you had every right. People like you shouldn't be overlooked." "Who are you?" Ellie asked. "That's not important. What matters is this. You have a choice. Your family was once part of a network, an ancient line of quiet warriors. Protectors, not instigators. We've been watching. And now it's time you knew or walk away." Ellie opened the box. Inside was a pair of leather gloves, worn but preserved with care. On the back of the left hand was an embossed symbol, identical to the one from the letter. "We don't seek the strongest," the woman continued. "We seek those who know when to use their strength and when to hold back." Ellie looked down at the gloves, then out toward the sunset. A strange feeling rose in her chest. Not fear, not excitement, but something deeper. A quiet knowing. The fight at Briarwood had only been the beginning. And maybe she hadn't been born to avoid what she carried inside, but to understand it, to lead it. That night, Ellie returned home in silence. Her grandfather, Raymond, sat in the living room with a book open on his lap, just as always. But this time, he didn't pretend not to know. He had seen the letter. He had recognized the box, the gloves. "We need to talk," he said softly, his voice low and steady like a drum echoing from another time. In the basement, once her mother's old training room, he laid down a faded mat across the wooden floor. He didn't say anything more. He just stood there, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp and serious. Ellie looked at him. No questions. She understood. This was a final test, not to defeat him, but to prove herself. The match began in silence. Raymond moved faster than she expected, even in his 70s. His strikes were measured, probing but razor sharp. Ellie dodged, countered, her movements fluid, instinctive. No hesitation. Their breaths echoed in the stillness, the creak of beneath their feet like an ancient battle drum. They moved like shadows weaving past one another, one shaped by experience, the other blazing with untapped fire. After 5 uninterrupted minutes, Ellie saw the opening, a subtle delay in her grandfather's shoulder turn. She didn't strike. Instead, she stepped into the space, placed her palm gently against his chest, a quiet assertion. "I could," she said, breathless. Raymond froze, then broke into a rare smile, the first she had seen since her mother's passing. "Yes," he said, "and you chose not to harm." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze stern, but filled with pride. "You're ready." The next morning, Ellie stood before the mirror, dressed in a plain black jacket, warrior's gloves tucked neatly in her pocket. She was no longer the girl who slouched and dodged hallway stairs. She was Ellie Dawson, granddaughter of a legend, inheritor of a quiet legacy. She stood at her desk and opened the final letter from the organization that had reached out to her. The handwriting was elegant, formal. "Your first trial will begin on April 14th. You may decline, but that, too, is a choice, and every choice carries consequence." Ellie folded the letter carefully and placed it into a drawer alongside her mother's gloves, now hers. There was no fear in her chest, only clarity and a quiet fire that had smoldered inside her for years. On her way to school, she passed through the iron gates of Briarwood Academy, a place that had once been an arena for ridicule, where she had been a nameless shadow. Now, every step she took was a testament to one truth. It is not the past that defines you. It's how you rise from it. In the courtyard, a group of underclassmen debated college dreams and future paths. A boy with thick glasses, hunched shoulders, and nervous hands dropped a stack of books. Ellie stepped forward, knelt beside him, and helped gather them one by one. She offered a gentle smile. No one has the right to make you feel small, she said softly. Remember that. The boy nodded, eyes wide with something new. Hope. And in that moment, Ellie understood. True strength isn't measured by who you can take down, but by who rises because of you. When the bell rang, Ellie took her usual seat in history class. No mocking laughter, no sideways glances, just a strange, quiet stillness, respect. In her mind, images blurred together. The fight with Raymond, the letter from the shadowed organization, and the aching solitude of her early years. Together, they crystallized into one truth. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. She had learned the most vital lesson, that true grit isn't born from power. It's born from choosing not to back down, not even an inch. In the middle of the bustling courtyard, Ellie looked up at the vast morning sky. Sunlight caught her eyes like a blade drawn from its sheath. A new chapter had begun. And this time, she wasn't walking into it as a victim. She was walking into it as a warrior.